Welcome back to the class, everyone. Today we are going to be getting right back into roster building. Specifically today we're going to be covering the GAC Omicrons once again. We've gone over these once before about 4 months ago, and in the game a lot of things have changed since then, so it's really worth digging back into them, not just with ones that were added, but counters that have changed over time and how it's affected the Omicrons in question. So that being said, we're going to define our terms here real quick. We're not just going to be like, oh, this one's number 1, this one's number 25th. I want to have them organized so that we can have a better understanding of not just saying Malgus is better than Rose, but understanding when it's a good idea for you to have Malguses, or when it's a good idea for you to say, hey, I don't have access to these, so I'm going to drop down to the lower tier because this is what it's going to give me. We're going for really transparency here rather than just saying, hey, you do this and hey, you do that. But that being said, let's get into it. So define our terms. First off, Unreal. These are Omicrons that if you don't have them, your character is essentially not fully unlocked. And there's only 2 that are actually going to fall into this category, so we'll cover them here really quickly. And that's Malgus's Leadership and Starkiller's Unique. These unlock so much of the potential for these characters. We're talking about a huge amount of speed for Malgus, as well as Mastery, Critical Avoidance. They heal whenever they get debuffs. The amount of counters that get cut out when you have the Omicron or when you don't have the Omicron is almost all of them. It's ridiculous the amount of damage or the amount of change that comes when you have that. Starkiller can be the same. We're not going to go into too much of detail on both those. I don't think that anybody here really needs to hear that. The only reasons you shouldn't have these 2 Omicrons is if you either A, don't care about GAC, or B, don't have them unlocked. So they're going to fall into the Unreal category. Next up is going to be Transformative. Transformative means that if you have this Omicron, while it may not make the team or that character just beat everything in sight and it just changes everything, there are going to be several counters, whether on offense or defense, where the viability is going to be totally different. I guess we'll take one example. We're going to go into these in a little bit more detail further in the video, but a great example would be Iden. Iden, whenever she gets attacked out of turn, or rather her whole team does, they gain turn meter, and on top of that they also gain max health, or they gain 35% max health protection, then 20% health protection when there's attacks out of turns. So basically any team before this that has attacks out of turns just is fine. Mon Mothma, Geos, whatever, they can do what they want to do. The second you put this on, those counters fall flat on their face, even with a really big gear disparity. This is one of the things that I've done for months now, is use Gear 12 Iden, not just her, but her whole team, to take down fully relic Mon Mothma. So really every character that is in Transformative 1 and Transformative 2 is going to have that effect. While again, they don't beat everything, the viability that they're going to have against 1 or 2 or 3 typical counters is all going to be different. By the way, these are ranked in order. There's probably a little room for margin between some of them, like, oh, this one's really better than that one. Not really, or they're close. But yeah, this is what that's meant to indicate. Next up, we have Impactful. Impactful Omicrons are going to be good ones, but more on the luxury side of things. You are going to encounter battles where they are going to make a difference, but there's really no guarantee that's going to happen every single time. I think a pretty good example of this is Asajj. Hers lets the team do a lot of really fun things like recover protection. They get more max health to start off. Her healing immunity, or her AoE, can reduce max health and protection every single time. The issue being different, the reason why she and the rest of these really aren't in the transformative area is they're not just randomly changing or specifically changing 1 or 2 counters. They're more so improving the viability that the team already has. It doesn't have like a specific cleanse, like for example, bounty hunters, troopers, they all still walk over it. It does really good things, but it doesn't actually transform the team. It impacts the team. I guess those are kind of synonyms, but I think I made my point pretty clear, where there are situations where these can be good, but for the most part, most of the counters are just going to go the exact same. You are going to see Malgus here twice. The reason for that is he has 3 Omicrons. His Leadership is a must-have, Unreal, and the other 2 are, again, impactful. And then last but not least is going to be Niche. What is Niche? Niche is when you have a character, rather an Omicron, that can be good, but you have to go through so many rabbit holes to get to this finally, oh, that was a good idea. I think that probably the most obvious one here is Krennic in that regard. I guess we could use Starkiller too for his, again, his other 2, not his Unique. His Unique is probably the best one in the entire game. But for Krennic, someone actually on my last video commented how, so if you have Krennic and you don't have Death Trooper for your item team, and you have Moff Gideon and Thrawn to spare, and you encounter a Qui-Gon Jinn team, where everyone is below a specific threshold, then this is actually really good Omicron. It can work. And that's kind of the example of niche we're looking for, where if you can jump through these like 3 specific rabbit holes of things that probably aren't gonna happen, then this Omicron has viability. So while again, you can kind of make anything good or anything worth it within these 5, you have to jump through some really specific ones for that value, and there can be a time for that. And one of the things that the niche one is going to serve for, and the reason why we need label it niche and not garbage, is because sometimes if you don't have any of these characters unlocked and you have like 3 or 4 Omicrons burning a hole in your pocket and you don't want to hoard it, some of them might even be good. Niche is probably gonna actually be more for impactful here, but niche can be used for that as well. Especially, I think the clearest one in that regard is going to be Starkiller's Boundless Force Throw. This is very specifically useful if you are constantly fighting Rays where they have a number 1 J tier on the team, but also a super tanky J tier that will eventually build enough evasion mastery because you're using Palpatine and Mara Jade with them, where these debuffs being undispellable makes a huge difference. And again, we're looking at a scenario that requires 4 or 5 steps to get there, but at the same time, that is something that can be very real to you. So without further ado, let's go into them. So we already talked about the Unreal, the Transformatives. Why are the Transformatives? Wampa. Dude just destroys. Before the Omicron, he really can't do much. After the Omicron, he is able to beat entire teams. I think the most notable, this isn't really relevant for my roster, my GACs, but for a lot of people who are building a roster, they're going after Jedi Knight Luke, they're going after Jabba or JML or whatever they're doing. They already have him R3, and as soon as they slap on the Omicron and give him somewhat decent mods, he's already beating Grievous right out the gate. Mon Mothma is another useful one. Iden is probably what I most commonly use him for. So it's not just that the Omicron is good or that he's beating okay teams or he has use, but he's serving as an entire team, which when you're punching up against rosters that are much larger than yours, this starts to make a huge difference because you don't have to gear up 4 characters. You can just gear up 1. I do like higher relics on him as well as good mods, but at the end of the day, there are some teams that he will just trash even without both of those. Next up is Qui-Gon Jinn. The reason why Wampa and Qui-Gon Jinn are here, and if you're a really endgame player, this might be a little bit weird, because they're probably not the Omicrons that are making the biggest difference in your roster right now. In fact, it's probably Traya, and we'll get to her in a second. But these are things that end up being good for the longest amount of time and still continue to have value as the game progresses. Qui-Gon Jinn's is amazing. I think my biggest bragging point for it the last time we did this video was the fact that it until now, and we'll see this with Traya, is the only Omicron that had to be nerfed because it was so overpowered when it first came out. And even then, most of its viability is still intact unless you want to use it against Galactic Legend, which in case it's pretty much garbage. That being said, it can be used pretty much anytime you have Jedi Knight Anakin, which is a starting character now, and Qui-Gon Jinn can also be bought through the Arena Store. It is super accessible, and with just those 2 characters, they can already tackle a fair amount of teams. It loses a ton of defensive viability the second Bad Batch comes out, unless you're going to put stupid good speed mods into the team. But offensively, it's a great team. I've used it many times to be able to help me take down partial Malgus teams or Maul teams or CLS teams or even Dash teams. All of those have happened within the last couple months in Kyber 1, and before that, there's still a lot of viability against other teams. Just because the AI typically plays it really dumb, and they will leave Qui-Gon Jinn for last, which if you leave Qui-Gon Jinn for last, the team never dies. So they'll go and beat up on Mace or JK or Luminar or whoever else is in the team. Next up is going to be Iden. Really didn't spend a lot of time on her. We already went through. The second you put on her leadership Omicron, anything that counters or attacks out of turn just immediately goes downhill. I guess we mentioned CLS is probably her biggest target. The Zam Omicron. The reason, again, why this one is in here before Traya, not that it's overall better than Traya, but you're going to have to build up bounty hunters in some fashion to either get Chewbacca when you're working towards your BAM or when you're working towards one of the other Galactic Legends. And when you're doing that, she elevates this team to do things that it just can't do before, because she typically, depending on how you have her modded, is adding about 70 speed to the whole stinking team. And when they do that, they can start to compete with these stronger teams like Dash or BAM or helping you 2-shot JMK. And now we get to the one that we've all been waiting for. And ignore my relics, my mods. Those will get fixed as soon as I get things squared away with being able to get a Reva shard. But this is like the talk of the town. Traya right now, her Omicron got put on her unique, and different from Asajj Ventress that we talked about earlier, This does exactly what the character needed it to do. It gave her just the amount of boost in both health and offense to be able to start to hit things, and then getting protection up whenever they give a debuff cuts out a lot of things. The most notable and probably most important reason this is an effect is that Traya now can beat Lord Vader teams without really that much work. I've seen it all over the board. Some people are going, full steam ahead with Savage and Talon, but I've even seen someone get it to work with like Sidious and Dooku as the sides, just because they can never get the kill because they're constantly stacked with protection up. And then one of the added boosts they actually gave to Darth Talon here, she's actually going to make a higher up on the Omicron list because of this, is the fact that when she's hit now, she's actually going to contribute to the 12 offense that goes into Traya's damage. Not to mention Nihilus gets his Annihilate super fast, and Sion gets held by Hatred super fast. So very, very good. The only reason why she's this low down in the list, and which she's still pretty darn high, is because when you're building a roster, the Traya team is typically not within a top 10 team you're going to make to start off. Not because it's not good, but because it's not required for anything, and it doesn't have the stepping stone process. I just took mine to R1. She'll be R5 here in probably a couple of weeks once things get sorted out with my roster. Next up is going to be our Transformative 2. We have a different selection here. We have Savage, pretty much for the same reason that Traya is in there. Both very good Omicrons. Savage does have a little bit of solo viability lower down in the rankings, especially on offense. I guess you can't solo things on defense. Overall, just really solid. It takes him from a 0 to a hero. He's able to do pretty cool things because the dude just doesn't die. I've been leaving him on 3v3 defense with Starkiller, and Starkiller is actually getting killed before he is because people are taking in like Janet Revan and Janet Luke, and they don't have the punch to kill my R5 Savage. Next up is going to be Ben Swolo. He's probably the first character that's going to be this low down on the list, even though he has 3 Omicrons. He's a very good character overall, but each one of his Omicrons, and I actually recommend 2 Omicrons on him, Force Diet as well as Family Legacy, they really only change about 1 or 2 counters on the defensive team, rather than changing a huge amount like again, Starkiller and Malgus. You're looking at almost all counters changing. This one, only really 2 of them do. The Family Legacy cuts out C as a counter, or at least makes it way more difficult because they have to take in a bunch of tank C that he doesn't get the healing immunity. And this one right here doesn't really cut out the counter, but it can make both JMK and JML more difficult because he's going to keep reviving, especially in 3s. It's so annoying if he keeps reviving every single time your JML takes a turn. And of course your JML is going to take a turn. He's like 600 speed, and you only have 2 other characters to kill him. So overall, pretty good, but again, they're only changing a little bit. Dash, again, we're getting lower on the list, so the amount of counters that these are stopping are few and far between. This was really, I think, more relevant when he got his Datacron, which actually still exists as of the time that I'm recording this, but it's not going to exist much longer. And basically, you need to almost take an anti-revive or a bypass taunt if he doesn't have the Omicron, because the Omicron pretty much allows any single, or allows the Vandor unique to work non-stop, where everything just gets revived constantly. That being said, next on the list, we have First Order TIE Pilot. The reason why this one, I believe the next one too, yeah, these 2 are lower down on the list, is because they're have much more uses in 3v3 of being transformative. The Hux team with First Order TIE Pilot and Lobster, I've used it to kill a lot of really fun things. I've used it to kill the CLS team, the Han and Chewbacca team with like Dash, as well as a Starkiller team, actually. So that does require a bit more investment than I currently have in him. But it's again a transformative use where those teams really didn't have a shot at doing those things before. Admiral Raddus is here again, mostly for 3v3 purposes. The Bad Batch counter actually becomes a lot harder when they keep getting their buffs back and just hitting a lot harder than they should be. Next up, we're going to be going to the impactful ones. Again, these are good. We're not meant to rag on them, but they're really not changed in the majority of matchups. Luminara is actually one that I have actually running with Starkiller. She's not changing every single match, but if she can, especially against people who use Grievous, if they come in and they're landing all their debuffs, if she gets 1 turn, which that's kind of the caveat because she doesn't a lot of times, she's going to be dispel everything, put up tenacity up. She's going to gain speed to be able to get back to it, and the team can't lose turn meter. This is really annoying if you think about GK actually on the Starkiller team, cleansing all that target lock and then everyone going. It's going to have a very similar effect, if not worse so. Next up is going to be Asajj. We really talked about her already. Changes she changes the viability team a lot. There just aren't really any counters that change in it, so it becomes more impactful than transformative. Chrysanthemum, very similar concept. Our guy here gets extra protection, as well as some added bonuses for he can't get ability blocked. There aren't really any super high counters out there that exist that this is stopping, but it definitely makes some things harder, and it can kind of cause the time, or can increase the viability of the timeouts. Akbar is here. I still have not grown to love Akbar. I know this is probably one of the characters that a lot of people vouched for a lot in the last round, and I think the matter of the fact is his leadership still just doesn't do enough, and the power creep of the game is increasing. And this team in particular hasn't gotten reinforcements. In fact, if anything, it's lost characters because you're already probably using, say, your Stormtrooper Han, if you have him, over Osana Staros, whereas before a lot of people were using him with him. Chirpa, again, his leadership is okay, but it really doesn't unlock any new counters. All it lets you do is just go a little bit faster, get more turn meter, and this can be really good if you already have your Ewok super souped up with like 400 speed on your Papalu after the unique. But at the same time, if you already have that amount of investment in relics and as well as mods before you put on the Omicron, I don't know how much actual change is happening in that moment. For what it's worth, Asajj and Hondo's are the two that I wish I had right now, but I'm trying to always keep two in the bank just in case a good one comes around. We had the thought that they might be needed for TB for a while, but I don't think that's a thing anymore. So next up is actually going to be Talon. Talon went up on the list in the same way that I guess Tripper went down on it, and the reason being is because of Trey. I still prefer Talon on the Malgus team. In my personal preference, that might change over time as I see how the counters develop. I just think that her unique is doing way more when it's giving turn meter when you're hitting the leader, when they have a leader tank that is super tanky. I think that's much more valuable really than what she's giving Trey. But that being said, it's still good. Adds a little bit of protection. I think the offense is really kind of going to be the main thing. Protection doesn't matter as much because you're getting so much bonus protection from Trey herself. But overall, it does some okay things. I don't think she's really going to be using a lot of damage, and her speed, I guess, could be helpful. But I think, again, ultimately, the reason why you would be using her is because you're adding offense, not only through her own Omicron, but also because Trey gets a boosted 12% offense every single time she gets a debuff for 2 turns. That's kind of a mouthful. All right, up next is Malgus. Again, Malgus is not here because of his leadership, but because of these other two. They actually can do some pretty fun things. It is noteworthy, Corbin's Legacy, this only has value in 5v5. It does not label the 5v5 GAC Omicron, but it basically is, because Doubt is already going to 2 other characters anytime, and if you're in 3v3, you know, 1 plus 2 is 3. Whereas in 5v5, this is going to make Doubt go to every single character, which is 4, which is more than 2. So we're pretty decent at math, and that's how that one works. This one as well, it's pretty good. It makes him have irresistible debuffs, I believe, as well as he gets critical chance up for 2 turns. I don't think that's really where his damage is coming from, but it's nice. It doesn't make the team worse. It's definitely going to cause some issues if, again, are the right amount of things fall into line. Next up is going to be Hondo. Hondo, I'm not saying I'm wrong about this, but I'm saying this evaluation, I think, is going to age poorly. Right now, Hondo is as I am calling him, the plug and play without play. He has a lot of good general viability as a scoundrel, but at the same time, he doesn't really seem to be stopping X, Y, and Z counter. I faced one on a Dash team recently that was all Relic 7 and whatnot. I used the same counter that I would have used before, which was Qui-Gon Jinn with Anakin. Anakin blew him up, and that was the end. It didn't change anything. That being said, I think it does add a lot of viability. Basically, it doubles his bonuses for captive, as well as he pretty much starts with 100% turn meter, so he can immediately captive someone. Again, another downside to this is really easy to cheese. If he's being used on defense, you can just go in and take your Gear 7 Baze. He will throw captive onto Baze, the other team will kill Baze, and Hondo will flee the battle, and every investment you put into him was pretty much worthless. I guess you call that Baze, so there's that. Next up is Tusken Raider. Decent-ish. It's only for 3v3, so that's a pretty big downside. And on top of that, really anything that has a powerful AoE and or a revive is going to stop that, because he's going to clone himself and they're just going to keep coming back. But again, there's plenty of ways around that. 000, I really don't like this one. And this is probably an entirely different conversation. But he's meant to bring the Afra team into viability in 3v3, and we'll complain about this more here in a second. But what his special here does just doesn't seem all that great. Like, he torture for 2 turns, that's kind of nice. That's going to increase a lot of damage. Then 20% extra health and protection. I do not like these Omicron abilities that they say if this ability defeats an enemy. It pretty much means if your character never defeats an enemy because you're struggling because the Omicron isn't good, then it's wasted. Again, this has a little bit of redeeming factors because you're getting 2 turns of torture and you're getting extra health and protection. So that can be nice. You can actually change the overall viability of the team. And now we get to the section where we're going to get the most comments from. And again, please do give me your comments. I'm not saying those are very welcome. I do like the stimulating conversation. And to be fair, a lot of them did change my mind from last time. But Talon's a lot higher up than she used to be. That being said, Star Killer, we've already kind of talked about Boundless Force Throw, how that's really good against JTR in that specific situation, so we'll leave him be. Next up is going to be Princess Leia. I don't really know what these buffs are adding to the Akbar team, or to be fair to another team. Even like CLS, like it's kind of almost ironic that they gave her Retribution and Tenacity up when the CLS team already has counterattacks and Tenacity from Nubaka. She's not worth pulling away a character. I'm sure there's some scenario where she kind of functions well. Director Krennic, we touched on him as well already. He's just not. You have to jump through a lot of hoops to actually see something happen there. Rose Tico, the truth here is just the bonus is just not enough. All the resistance allies gain 10% offense for each exposed enemy. I guess if you're really strapped for teams and you need to use like a third string resistance team because Rey's off of doing something else and you have low teams, it can be good-ish. And the last one, I guess this is the only one that I think I'm just gonna flat out call garbage. Whenever BT1 or 000 defeat an enemy, their cooldowns are refreshed and they gain 30% turn meter. So again, you have to kill someone. If you're struggling to do that, then it's kind of pointless. And there's so many ways to stop turn meter, especially when the Afra team is probably going to be used most of the time against either Galactic Legends or a one tier below that. So many of those have ways to stop turn meter, or they have a way that turn meter bites you in the butt later on. Rey will gain mastery. SLKR has Hux, who doesn't allow it. I believe Jabba, they gain turn meter when you do. JMK just says no. So there's so many things where here, which like, even if you get the kill, you know, like the payoff isn't even good. And then I guess you're refreshing your cooldowns so that you can use burning again instead of the wacky thing. I don't know. It does not. Tell me if I'm wrong. I actually don't want to be wrong in that case, but I would be. It's fine if I am. I just don't see what that is doing or what it's doing. But overall, that is everything. Let me know your thoughts. Again, this isn't meant to be like, oh, you have to do these and then these and then these and then these. You have to really see what's right overall for your roster first, and see, like, if you don't have access to these top 3 tier characters, or you only have access to 2 of them and you've got those Omicrons, then yeah, a lot of, especially in the impact pile here, a lot of these are going to start to be used. Like, I know there's a really good argument for Admiral Akbar, specifically because you need more teams and he's available. But that being said, that is going to be it for today. So, as always, remember to like and subscribe and stay awesome.